Hello, welcome back to the channel. Here I'm in Grimtools. I'm going to have a look at the Berzerker mastery. It's the new mastery that's coming in the Fangs of Astrakhan expansion. As it says on Grimtools, please keep in mind it's not a final version and it's subject to change. So a lot of the numbers on here for the skills, the values will probably change. Crate are really good at balancing stuff, so I'm not going to spot something on here and start pointing and going, oh, that's broken, it's OP, because if there is something that is broken and OP, they will fix it so that it's not crazy. However, I'm going to have a look. So the disclaimer here is this is in Grimtools, this is not in the game. I haven't played this class. Anyone can go onto Grimtools and look at this and come to the same conclusions I'm coming to. I just thought I'd have a chat about it on here because it's interesting because they've got it on here. So one of the things you can do before you start looking at this is you can select another class and you can see that a Berzerker and a soldier is called a Thane. I'm guessing these are correct and that this is what they'll be called in the actual game. Demolitionist, Dreadnought, Occultist, Primalist. I don't know, maybe these just Reaver. Some of these seem really familiar. I don't know why that is. Evoker, Mystic. It's like they haven't got much imagination with these names. Runekeeper. I'm sure I've seen some of these before. Veil Walker. That's all right. Oathkeeper, Zealots. Yeah. So if you have a look at this, I'll put all the points in here so I can mess about with the skills. I won't look at the passivey things just yet. Let's look at the actual skills. There's a thing here. 140% weapon damage on that attack skill, 30 energy cost. So it's an active skill that you'll fire off as an attack. When it's maxed out, 275% weapon damage. Immediately you're looking at that and thinking if you've got a two-handed weapon, it's going to be pretty good. So maybe you could pair this up with Shaman, go with a two-handed or soldier because it's doing physical and pierce. I know it's got bleed on that one, hasn't it? Yeah. So I have already looked at this. I mean, I'm not randomly going in and clicking on these things. I've looked through. So Shaman will do bleeding damage with a two-handed weapon. So maybe that's what that's going to be useful for. It's just physical as well. What I'm not going to look at here is the potential for damage conversion because it will just get way too confusing. I'm going to do that when the expansion is actually released and I can mess about with it properly in the game. Because a lot of this at the moment, like I said, these numbers will change. Right, so that's leap. It's got a target area as well. So obviously if you jump into a group, it will hit all of them. So it might be quite good. Again, without testing it out in the game, it's hard to know exactly what you're going to be getting with that. This thing here, Rallying Cry, the base skill has a 60-second duration. It's buffing your allies. So if you're running around on your own, it'll do it to you. If you've got pets or if you've got temporary friendlies with you or other minion type things, so the health restored's kind of useful for pets. If you've got Guardians of Empyrean, Wind Devils and stuff, they're invincible anyway, so that's of limited use. Puts their OA up. Movement speed, that enables the ability to dual wield melee and ranged weapons. Yeah, okay, so don't underestimate how useful that's going to be, because the only character that can dual wield ranged weapons, the only mastery that can dual wield ranged weapons so far is without gear is Inquisitor, and the only character that can dual wield melee without gear to do it is Nightblade. So this gives you that ability without using either of those masters, which is quite nice. Puts crit damage up, entrapment resistance. So that doesn't mean you can only dual wield while that skill is active. That's the thing that's confusing people on here with these things, I think, is that has got a duration, but that thing there enables the ability to dual wield permanently, like all the time. It's not just while that skill's active. So this thing here, Bone Chilling Cry, this was the thing that's more like War Cry, not that, because it drops the enemy resistances. So it drops their pierce resistance, their cold resistance, chaos resistance. Now, things that drop chaos resistance, they're few and far between. I know the Inquisitor had one, but that's quite useful. So maxed out, it's minus 25%. So that's quite good. 12-second duration, 6-second skill recharge. So you can have that up almost all the time if your energy can cope with it. So that's quite handy. And it covers all sorts of different masteries there, because pierce resistance, obviously, soldier and whoever else. Cold and chaos, quite a few different character classes there. And minus 40% bleeding resistance. So yeah, well, I was going to say this character, this class, there's a lot of bleeding damage stuff and there's a lot of cold damage stuff. Obviously, bleeding damage is more scaling with cunning, and cold damage is scaling with spirit. So you possibly wouldn't want to do both, although maybe you would if you were just going for a single mastery attempt. Right. What does this thing do? This is an exclusive skill. All right, so there's two exclusive skills. There's that one there that's got cold damage on it, and it's got conversions from physical and piercing to cold, which is quite handy. And if you max that out, you will see that it caps out on the soft cap at 40% piercing converted to cold and 15% physical converted to cold. Now, I wasn't too sure about that, because if you look at that, it starts off at 15%, but when you max it out, it's only the piercing that's gone up. I don't know whether that's just broken on here, and it should be 40% physical as well. Again, until it comes out in the game and they patch it a couple of times, you can't really guarantee any of these figures are going to be what they are on here. So that's your cold damage one, and that's your bleeding one. Maxed out, it heavily buffs bleeding, and it increases your healing effects by 20%, which is quite nice. So yeah, if you go cold damage, do that one. If you do bleeding, do that one. Next up, Onslaught is a default weapon replacer. It's a default attack replacer. So that's nice to have another one of those. Another default attack replacer. It's weapon damage and cold damage, and that there is going to convert cold damage to chaos damage and pierce into chaos. So if you were pairing this up with, say, an occultist doing chaos damage, that'd be nice. That's got bleeding, so chaos and bleeding mixed up there, because obviously nothing's going to convert bleed. I was going to say, anything on here that's got bleeding damage, it will stay as bleeding damage. There's nothing in the game that will convert bleeding damage to some other thing, and there's nothing in the game at the moment that will convert any other damage over time to bleeding. I would go as far as to guess, I could be wrong, they're not going to introduce gear that converts to or from bleeding damage. I don't think they will. It's too much of a big deal if they do that. They might, but again, I don't think they would, because it defeats the object of this class for a start, because there's a lot of this stuff's bleeding, so you wouldn't want to convert away from it. Anyway, so that's your default attack replacer, and if that's maxed out, it's doing 130% weapon damage. But according to the figures on here, like I said, these could change. They probably will. That's got cold buff and a bleeding buff. And that's just got a load of bleeding stuff on it and reduced targets damage, which is fair enough. I'll come back to the animals in a minute. This is a cold damage thing. Amatox pact. Now it's adding that cold damage to your weapon attack and the weapon attack of any allies around you. It's not dealing cold damage, as far as I can tell, based on what I know about other skills in the game. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. And that's got pierce buffs, chaos buffs, bleeding buffs. It does mix up the cold damage and the bleeding damage and the other damage types quite a bit. And that's got 30% poison acid resistance, 30% vitality resistance. That's all right. So that's just a toggle skill that adds in defensive ability armor and some cold damage and some stuff. It's kind of all right. It's not, I don't get excited about that. I'll come back to these animals in a minute. This thing's interesting because you look at that and maxed out, it's doing cold damage, frostburn, it's slowing targets down. Now, when you read that brown text, orange text, at 100% cast speed, Winds of Astikar deals damage and drains energy every 0.16 seconds and grows in size every 0.48 until it reaches. So that sounds to me, the wording on that about cast speed, that's a it's like a channel skill. It's got a high energy cost, but it's got a target area and a radius. So I think whether that's centered on you or where you cast it, I'm not sure. Again, without seeing this in the game and playing this and trying it out, it's hard to know exactly what that's going to look like. But it's definitely a channel skill. How it actually works, how it shoots out from the player character or appears on the screen, hard to tell without playing the game. And that increases the damage, and does it increase the... No, it doesn't increase the radius, it just increases the damage. Okay. Right, so the passives, that enables the ability to dual wield weapons as well. It's very much like Nightblade in that you've got that, or you've got that, which is like the node off pneumatic burst. No, which one was it? Oh god, that one, sorry. Yeah, so you've got that or that, both enable the ability to dual wield weapons. That's both types of weapons. It says dual wield weapons, it's not specific, so you have to assume it's both ranged and melee, and that's bleeding damage. That thing activates with all default weapon attacks. So that thing, Blood Fangs, if you have a look at where's Bat? Oh, I never remember what colour Bat is. If you have a look at Bat, just as an example, Blood Fangs, so that will trigger a devotion. So Blood Fangs activates with default weapon attacks, and it's got a chance to trigger a devotion. I suspect that will as well. Avalanche, that's the cold one. So there's your bleeding one, there's your cold damage one. I'm generalising. So yeah, so Avalanche and Blood Fangs can both trigger devotion thingies. Back to it. So that's those two things. So that's just a completely passive damage bonus. That triggers on attack, that triggers on attack. These things down here. Right, so that thing there, it says, as you land critical blows, so that will trigger, every time you land a critical hit, that has a 100% chance of activating. 5-second skill recharge, 3-second duration. So it's up to 3 seconds, it's recharging for 5, and you've got 100% chance of activating on crits. It's not bad. And that thing there activates when health drops below 40%. We've seen these before, these type of skills. That's got combined damage absorption and 20% offensive ability increase, so that's all right. Right, so the animals, you can turn into a werewolf, yay, and you can turn into a were-raven. Now, when you read this, they both say the same thing. This form has its own basic attack. Hang on. Yeah, sorry, the wording's got a bit. Let's read that one. That one actually makes sense. Raven form has its own basic attack and cannot trigger weapon pool skills. So what that means is these things up here that trigger off default weapon attacks, if you're attacking with that, using ice talons or whatever, running around attacking things, it won't use these. So I think it's going to be maybe a bit of a niche thing. If you look at that, it does weapon damage. So if you've got a weapon, your werewolf form will benefit from it. If you've got a weapon, your raven form will not benefit from it, from what I can see there. Doesn't mention weapon damage, but it's got 100% chance to pass through enemies. Piercing damage, chaos, so you could be a chaos werewolf, whoopee. And then there's your OP, attack damage converted to health. Modifies feral claws. All that means is the attack that you've got there has that added onto it. Gets attack damage converted to health. And because that factors in 120% weapon damage, if you've got any other things that, like devotions that do attack damage converted to health, because that's doing weapon damage, it'll pull that in. So that could be quite strong. Again, you can't rely on these numbers staying the way they are when the expansion actually comes out. Reduce targets DA, chance on enemy death to refresh due rate. Yeah, that whole enemy death thing, that's fine if you're scrapping loads, but if you're fighting one boss, it's not really going to make any difference. So that's Werewolf, Raven. What was this now? Let's have a look. Piercing and cold. So he was doing without conversions, piercing, and a bit of buffs bleeding, but doesn't actually do bleeding. Okay. Oh, hang on. Rip and tear. Rip and tear does bleeding damage. Rip and tear. They just totally nicked that from Doom, but good for them. Right. Cold snap, frostburn. Yeah, that's all right actually. I don't know though. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm going to try this and run around as a werewolf and run around as a raven and see what it's like. But ultimately, you're looking at bleeding damage or cold damage without stuff being converted. So, bleeding damage. Soldier's got some bleeding stuff on it. Fighting form has got bleeding. Yeah. I mean, you'd be tanky as heck, I think. Soldier. Occultist, Bloody Pox has got bleeding on it. That drops bleeding resistance as well. So yeah, Occultist great. I love Occultist, you all know that. Occultist would work well. Where's an Arcanist gone? So yeah, so you got all this cold damage stuff on here. I've been doing a cold damage build recently, and I did like the look of a lot of the stuff on here. That channel skill thing, it's quite interesting. Whether you want to use that or Star Pact, because you've got, yeah, see that's cold, but it's got lightning on it as well. Bit of conversion. Right. I'm not going to go on and on. I mean, I could talk about this sort of stuff for hours and go through all the devotions and everything, but hopefully that was a bit of a quick overview of the skills and stuff on here for this new Berzerker class. As I was saying, don't look at this and see specific numbers and start thinking, oh yeah, because it's going to change. We all know it's going to change. Grimtools knows it's going to change as well. Please keep in mind it's not a final version, it's subject to change. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing me wittering on about that and don't think it was just some clickbait thing. It's interesting that it's on Grimtools and we can look at it and mess about with it and talk about it. And that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed that video. I'll catch you all in the next one.